Billionaire receives a letter on Easter Day from his ex-wife. He is shocked to discover what she wants. He built a billion-dollar empire, but lost the one person who believed in him. 3 years of silence, no warning. Then, on Easter morning, her letter arrived. What was inside shattered everything he thought he knew. There's something incredibly powerful about Easter. They say Easter is a time of renewal. It's a season that speaks of redemption, resurrection, and the miracle of second chances. While many see it as just a holiday with eggs and chocolate, some moments around this time carry meaning too deep for words. This story is about a billionaire who built empires but lost what mattered most: his wife. Not to another man, not to betrayal, but to bitterness, ego, and the pain of past mistakes. Years later, on Easter morning, he receives a letter that turns his world upside down. What could she possibly want now, after vanishing with nothing but silence? This isn't just a story about love lost and found. It's about healing, reconnection, renewal, God's mercy, and the rare gift of forgiveness. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful story family. Before we begin, I would be glad to know that these lessons get to people in different parts of the world, so please let me know where you're watching from. And thank you so much for being part of this growing story family. You matter here, truly. Let us begin. Nolan Pierce woke on Easter morning to the muted hum of Manhattan beyond his penthouse windows. Sunlight sliced through the blinds, carving sharp lines across his polished oak floor. He stretched, the silk sheets cool against his skin, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The coffee machine hissed to life as he surveyed the skyline, his empire of steel and glass, built brick by brick from nothing. At 42, he was untouchable, a billionaire whose name commanded boardrooms and headlines. But the weight in his chest, a dull ache that never left, told a different story. He poured his coffee, black and scalding, and crossed to his desk where a stack of corporate reports awaited. Contracts, mergers, numbers that never lied. His fingers brushed something out of place, a single envelope tucked beneath a folder like an afterthought. No name, no return address, just cream-colored paper, faintly creased with handwriting that stopped his breath. Raya, his ex-wife. 3 years gone, 3 years of silence. He set the coffee down untouched. The envelope felt heavier than it should, as if it carried more than paper. He traced the ink, her looping letters, deliberate and familiar. His pulse quickened, a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. He slit the seal with a letter opener, careful not to tear what lay inside. Her words were spare, each one a needle. This Easter, I'm not asking for anything except one honest hour with you. Meet me at the place we said goodbye. Noon. I won't wait twice. R. He read it again. Then a third time. The place we said goodbye. Central Park, the bench by the pond, where they'd signed the divorce papers under a gray October sky. She'd walked away without a word, her heels clicking on the path until the sound faded. He'd told himself he didn't care. He'd lied. Nolan leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. Why now? Raya had vanished. No calls, no trace, not even a whisper through mutual friends. He'd buried the hurt, poured himself into work, convinced himself the past was dead. But here it was, alive in her handwriting, pulling him back. He stood and crossed to the window, the letter still in his hand. Below, the city churned, taxis weaving, people blurring into dots. Easter Sunday. Churches would be full, families gathering, the world pretending at renewal. He didn't believe in second chances. Not anymore. Yet the thought of her waiting, of her eyes meeting his, stirred something he couldn't name. He glanced at his watch. 9:30, 2.5 hours to decide. The penthouse was too quiet, the air too still. He moved to the closet, pulling on a tailored navy jacket, crisp white shirt, no tie. Casual enough to look unbothered, sharp enough to feel in control. His phone buzzed, a board member texting about a deal in Dubai. He ignored it. For once, the empire could wait. Downstairs, his driver, Marcus, leaned against the black SUV, scrolling his phone. "Morning, Mr. Pierce. Where to?" Nolan hesitated. "Central Park." The pond. Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing, opening the door. The city slid by in streaks of color. Yellow cabs, green awnings, a street preacher shouting about salvation. Nolan barely noticed. His thumb traced the edge of the letter, now folded in his pocket. What did she want? Money? Closure? To twist the knife one last time? They'd met a decade ago when he was still clawing his way up. Raya was a painter, her canvases alive with color, her laugh a sound that could pull him out of any darkness. She'd believed in him when he was no one, stayed through the sleepless nights, the gambles that paid off. But success changed things. He changed. Meetings replaced dinners. Ambition drowned out her voice. The fights grew sharp, her accusing him of forgetting who he was, him snapping that she didn't understand what it took to win. The last year was a war of silences, broken only by her leaving. He told himself she was the one who gave up. But late at night, when whiskey burned his throat, he knew better. The SUV stopped near the park's edge. "Want me to wait?" Marcus asked. "Number, I'll call." Nolan stepped out, the April air cool against his face. The park was alive, kids chasing balloons, couples strolling, a saxophonist playing something mournful. He walked the familiar path, the pond glinting ahead. His stomach tightened. What if she didn't show? What if she did? The bench came into view, weathered wood under a budding oak. Empty. He checked his watch, 11:45. Too early. He sat, the letter burning a hole in his pocket. Around him, the world moved on. Joggers, dogs, laughter. He felt like a stranger in it. A shadow crossed the path. He looked up, and there she was. Raya Monroe. Her curls caught the light, darker than he remembered, framing a face that hadn't softened with time. She wore a soft yellow dress, simple but striking, her arms crossed against the breeze. Her eyes, hazel, piercing, locked on his. No smile, no warmth, just a steady gaze that pinned him in place. "You came," she said, her voice low, like she hadn't been sure. "You asked?" He stood, taller than her but feeling smaller. "Why now, Raya?" She didn't answer right away. She sat on the bench, leaving space between them, her hands folded in her lap. "You look the same," she said finally, "except your heart looks heavier." He bristled, the old defenses rising. "Don't start with that. You wrote the letter. You wanted this. So talk." Her lips pressed tight, a flash of the stubbornness he knew too well. "I'm not here to fight, Nolan. Not today." "Then why are you here?" He heard the edge in his voice, hated it but couldn't stop. 3 years, not a word. Now you show up with some cryptic note, telling me to meet you like it's nothing. What do you want? She looked at the pond, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. "I didn't think you'd come," she said quietly. "I almost didn't send it." "That's not an answer." Her eyes flicked back to him, sharper now. "You always needed answers right away, didn't you? No patience for the in-between." He laughed, short and bitter. "You left, Raya. No warning, no explanation. Just gone. You don't get to lecture me about patience." She flinched, just enough for him to notice. Guilt pricked him, but he pushed it down. She'd called this meeting. She owed him. "I'm not here to dig up the past," she said, her voice steady again. "Not like that. I needed to see you, to know you're still you." "Still me?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at her profile. "What's that supposed to mean?" You think I've changed. Haven't you? Her gaze met his, unflinching. The man I married didn't live for boardrooms. He lived for something real. The words landed like a slap. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that he'd built everything for them. For her. But the lie stuck in his throat. Instead, he said, "You didn't stick around to find out." She looked away, her jaw tight. For a moment, they sat in silence, the saxophonist's notes drifting over the water. He studied her, the lines around her eyes, new but faint, the way her shoulders carried a weight he didn't understand. She wasn't the same Raya. Neither was he. She reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope, this one smaller, sealed. "Take this," she said, holding it out. "Read it tonight. Alone." He stared at it, his pulse spiking again. "What is this? Another game?" "No games." Her voice was firm, but her hand trembled slightly. "Just read it. Please." He took it, the paper cool against his fingers. "And then what?" "Then you decide what happens next." She stood, brushing her dress smooth. "I meant what I said, Nolan. 1 honest hour. That's all I'm asking." He opened his mouth to argue, to demand more, but she was already moving, her steps light but deliberate on the path. "Raya," he called. She paused, half turning, her eyes softer now, almost sad. "Tonight," she said. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. He sat there, the second envelope heavier than the first. The park spun on, kids laughing, birds skimming the pond. But he felt anchored, trapped in a moment that didn't make sense. What was in the letter? Why tonight? Why her? His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Everything okay, boss?" He didn't reply. Nothing was okay. He stood, slipping the envelope into his pocket, and started walking. The city blurred around him, a haze of noise and motion. Raya's voice echoed. "Your heart looks heavier," and he hated how it cut. She'd always seen through him, even when he didn't want her to. Now she was back, stirring up questions he'd buried, leaving him with a letter he wasn't sure he wanted to open. Back at the penthouse, he poured a whiskey, the glass cold against his palm. The second envelope sat on his desk, unopened, daring him. He paced, the skyline glittering beyond the glass. Night fell, slow and heavy, the city's pulse sinking with his own. He sank into his chair, staring at the letter. What did she want? Forgiveness? A fight? Something else? The clock ticked past 8, then 9. He reached for the envelope, his fingers brushing the seal. Whatever was inside, he wasn't ready. But he couldn't wait any longer. Nolan's fingers hovered over the envelope, the whiskey glass forgotten on his desk. The penthouse was silent, the city's hum a distant pulse beyond the windows. Raya's words from the park echoed, "Read it tonight, alone." And each tick of the clock tightened the knot in his chest. He'd spent hours pacing, replaying their conversation, her hazel eyes cutting through him like they always had. What could she possibly say now that would change anything? He slit the seal, the paper giving way with a soft tear, and unfolded the letter. Her handwriting filled the page, steady but raw, each word a thread pulling him back to a life he'd tried to forget. "Nolan, I've written this 100 times in my head, but putting it on paper feels like breaking a promise to myself. I never wanted to come back like this, dragging up what we buried. But some truths don't stay quiet, no matter how long you run from them. I never stopped loving you. Not when we fought, not when I left, not even now. But I couldn't stay with someone who made me feel small. You didn't mean to. You were chasing something bigger than us, and I was too stubborn to wait. We both paid for it. I needed to heal, to find myself again. I thought silence was the kindest thing I could give you. I was wrong. There's something I never told you, something I carried alone because I didn't trust us to hold it together. When I left 3 years ago, I wasn't just running from you. I was pregnant. Nolan's breath caught, the room tilting. He read the line again, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves. Pregnant. His hand tightened on the paper, creasing it. He forced himself to keep reading. Her name is Lila. She's 2 now, with your eyes and my curls. I didn't know how to tell you then. Every time I tried, I saw us tearing each other apart, and I couldn't let that touch her. I thought I was protecting her, choosing a clean break over a messy fight. But she's growing, asking questions, and I see you in her every day. Keeping her from you isn't fair anymore, not to her, not to you. I'm not asking you to fix this or to be someone you're not. I don't know what happens next. Maybe nothing. But I needed you to know she exists. If you want to meet her, I'll be at the park tomorrow. Same time, same place. If you don't come, I'll understand. Either way, I'm sorry for the years I stole from you both. Raya. He let the letter fall to the desk, his pulse a drum in his ears. A daughter, Lila, 2 years old. The math checked out. 3 years since Raya left, the months of silence before that. He pressed his palms to his eyes, the weight of it crashing in. All this time he'd been a father and didn't know. Raya had carried this alone, raised a child alone, while he'd built towers and chased deals, blind to the life she'd hidden. He stood, the chair scraping behind him, and crossed to the window. The skyline glittered, cold and indifferent. He wanted to be angry. Raya had no right to keep this from him, to decide his role without a word. But the anger wouldn't hold. Beneath it was something sharper. Guilt. He'd pushed her away, made her feel small, just as she'd written. Had he given her any reason to trust him with this? He turned back to the letter, rereading her words. Your eyes and my curls. He tried to picture her, Lila, a toddler with Raya's fire and his stubborn streak. The thought was a knife, twisting with every detail he didn't know. Did she laugh like her mother? Was she shy? Did she even know his name? The whiskey bottle called, but he ignored it. He needed clarity, not a blur. Tomorrow. Noon. The same bench. Raya would be there, maybe with Lila, maybe alone. He could walk away, pretend the letter never came, keep his life clean and controlled. Or he could go, face the truth, and risk everything he'd built around his heart. He sank onto the couch, the letter clutched in his hand. Sleep was impossible. The night stretched endless, filled with questions he couldn't answer. Why tell him now? Was it really about Lila, or was Raya reaching for something else? Forgiveness, redemption, a way back? And what did he want? He'd spent years convincing himself he didn't need her, didn't need anyone. But the ache in his chest said otherwise. Morning came, gray and heavy, the city waking under a veil of clouds. Nolan dressed slowly, jeans, a charcoal sweater, no armor of a suit today. He caught his reflection in the mirror. Hollow eyes, a jaw tight with sleepless tension. He barely recognized himself. Downstairs, Marcus was waiting, his usual banter replaced with a quiet nod. Park again? Yeah. Nolan's voice was rough, like he'd been shouting all night. Same spot. The drive was a blur, the city's rhythm out of sync with his own. He kept the letter in his pocket, its weight a reminder of what waited. The park loomed ahead, the path to the pond achingly familiar. His steps slowed as the bench came into view. Raya was there, alone, her coat pulled tight against the chill. She stood as he approached, her eyes searching his face. You read it, she said, not a question. He nodded, his throat tight. Lila. Her lips parted, a flicker of relief crossing her face. I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't. He stopped a few feet away, the distance between them a chasm. Why didn't you tell me, Raya? 3 years. You had no right. I know. Her voice broke just for a moment. I know, Nolan. I told myself I was protecting her, but maybe I was protecting myself. From you, from us, from what we'd become. He wanted to snap back, to let the hurt spill out, but her eyes stopped him, raw, unguarded, carrying a pain that matched his own. "Where is she?" he asked instead. "With my sister a few blocks away." Raya's hands twisted together, a nervous habit he'd forgotten. "I didn't bring her because I didn't know if you'd want this. If you'd want her." The words hit harder than he expected. "You think I'd walk away from my own kid? I don't know what you'd do, Nolan." Her voice was steady now, but her eyes were wet. "I don't know you anymore." He looked away, the pond rippling under the gray sky. Kids ran past, their laughter sharp against the quiet. "What happens now?" he said finally. "You drop this on me and what? Expect me to just step in? Be a father overnight?" "No." She stepped closer, her voice low. "I don't expect anything. I just couldn't keep lying to her. To you. If you want to meet her, I'll make it work. If you don't—" She swallowed, her gaze dropping. "I'll figure it out. Like I have." He studied her, the woman he'd loved and lost, now a stranger with his daughter's name on her lips. The air between them crackled, heavy with things unsaid. He could walk away, keep his world intact, but the thought of Lila, her eyes, his eyes, held him there. "Tomorrow," he said, the word rough. "Bring her tomorrow. I want to see her." Raya's breath caught, a small sound. "Okay," she whispered. "Noon. Here." He nodded, his jaw tight. She turned to go, then paused, looking back. "Nolan, I'm sorry. For all of it." He didn't answer. She walked away, her figure fading into the park's blur. He stood there, alone, the letter burning in his pocket, the weight of tomorrow heavier than anything he'd ever carried. Nolan stood frozen by the pond, Raya's parting words, "I'm sorry, for all of it," hanging in the air like smoke. The park buzzed around him, oblivious to the earthquake inside his chest. Lila, his daughter. 2 years old, with his eyes and her mother's curls, growing up without him because Raya decided he didn't deserve to know. His fingers tightened around the letter in his pocket, its edges worn from rereading. Tomorrow he'd meet her. Tomorrow everything would change. But today the betrayal burned, raw and relentless. He walked not toward the SUV where Marcus waited, but deeper into the park, the path blurring under his feet. His breath came sharp, too fast, each inhale stoking the fire. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of him rebuilding a life without her, while she raised their child alone. The unfairness of it choked him. He stopped under a gnarled oak, his fist slamming against the bark, pain jolting up his arm. It wasn't enough. Nothing would be. Back at the penthouse, the door slammed behind him, the sound echoing in the sterile quiet. He crossed to the bar, poured a whiskey, then another, the glass trembling in his hand. "She kept my child from me," he said aloud, the words jagged, testing their weight. They didn't fit, didn't make sense. He hurled the glass against the wall, amber liquid streaking down the plaster, shards glittering on the floor. His knees buckled, and he sank onto the couch, head in his hands. Anger gave way to a fog of confusion. Why now? Why tell him at all? Raya's letter said she saw him in Lila every day. Had she planned to keep her a secret forever? He pictured a little girl laughing, running, asking for a father who didn't exist. The image twisted something deep, something he hadn't touched in years. He wasn't ready to be a father. He didn't even know how. But the thought of her out there without him was worse. He needed answers, and Raya wasn't here to give them. But someone else might. Julian Cross, his oldest friend, the one person Raya trusted when their marriage fell apart. Julian, with his calm advice and sharp eyes, had been her confidant, her ally. If anyone knew about Lila, it was him. Nolan grabbed his phone, ignoring the late hour, and dialed. Julian answered on the second ring, his voice smooth as ever. Nolan, didn't expect you tonight. Meet me, Nolan said, no preamble. Now. A pause. Everything okay? Just meet me. The usual place. 30 minutes later, Nolan pushed through the door of the Anchor, a dimly lit bar on the Lower East Side where they'd shared too many nights. Julian was already there, nursing a bourbon at a corner table, his gray suit rumpled from a long day. At 45, he looked older than Nolan remembered, lines deeper, eyes sharper. He raised his glass as Nolan approached. "You look like hell, friend." Nolan slid into the chair, his jaw tight. "Did you know?" Julian's brow lifted, but his face stayed neutral. "Know what?" "Don't play games, Julian." Nolan leaned forward, voice low, each word a blade. "Raya, Lila. Did you know she had a kid?" "My kid?" The air shifted, heavy with the question. Julian set his glass down, slow, deliberate. His eyes met Nolan's, steady but guarded. "Yeah," he said finally. "I knew." Nolan's fist clenched on the table, knuckles white. "You knew? And you didn't tell me?" Julian didn't flinch. "She asked me not to." "That's not good enough." Nolan's voice rose, drawing a glance from the bartender. He forced it down, but the anger bled through. 3 years, Julian. 3 years she kept my daughter from me, and you, my friend, kept her secret. Why? Julian leaned back, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. Because she didn't trust you, Nolan. You weren't the man she needed back then. You know it. The words landed like a punch, stealing his breath. Nolan wanted to argue, to shout that Julian was wrong, that he'd been enough, more than enough. But the truth was there, sharp and undeniable. He'd been consumed, chasing power, leaving Raya to fight for scraps of his attention. He'd failed her. And now this. She was scared, Julian went on, his voice softer now but no less cutting. Scared of what you'd do if you knew. Scared you'd try to take Lila, or worse, that you'd walk away. She couldn't handle either one. So she chose for me. Nolan's voice cracked, the anger fraying into something raw. She decided I didn't get a say? Julian's eyes narrowed. What would you have done, Nolan? Back then, with your deals and your empire, would you have dropped it all for a kid? For her? Nolan opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't know. 3 years ago, he was a different man, harder, hungrier, blind to anything but the next win. The thought of a child, of Raya needing him, would have been a weight he didn't know how to carry. But that didn't make it right. You should have told me, he said, quieter now, the fight draining out. You owed me that. Julian shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips, not unkind. I owed her more. She was drowning, Nolan. You didn't see it. The words stung, worse than the anger. Nolan looked away, the bar's low hum filling the silence, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, a jukebox playing something old. He felt exposed, every flaw laid bare. Julian had seen it all, had chosen Raya's side, and part of Nolan couldn't blame him. What's she like? He asked suddenly, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Lila. Julian's face softened, just for a moment. She's bright. Curious. Got Raya's fire, that's for sure. And yeah, your eyes. It's uncanny. Nolan's throat tightened. He tried to picture her, but the image was incomplete, a sketch without details. Raya's bringing her tomorrow, he said, almost to himself. I'm meeting her. Julian's brow lifted again, surprise flickering. You're ready for that? No, Nolan admitted, the honesty bitter. But I'm doing it anyway. Julian nodded, slow, like he was measuring something. Be careful, Nolan. This isn't just about you anymore. That little girl, she's real. She's not a deal you can close. The warning hung between them, heavy with truth. Nolan stood, his chair scraping the floor. I know, he said, though he wasn't sure he did. Thanks for meeting me. Julian raised his glass, a half toast. Don't hate me too long, all right? Nolan didn't answer. He walked out, the night air sharp against his skin. The city pulsed around him, alive and indifferent, while his world cracked open. Lila, Raya, Julian's betrayal, or maybe his loyalty to someone who needed it more. It was too much, too fast, and he had no map for what came next. He climbed into the SUV, Marcus glancing at him in the rear view. Home, boss. Yeah, Nolan said, his voice hollow. Home? But home was just a penthouse, a shell of glass and steel. The real weight waited for tomorrow. Lila's face, Raya's eyes, a chance to be something he'd never been. He leaned back, the letter still in his pocket, and closed his eyes. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet ache, a question he couldn't answer. What kind of father am I going to be? Nolan leaned back in the SUV, the city lights streaking past, each one a blur against the weight in his chest. Julian's words clung to him. She's not a deal you can close, and the truth of it stung. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, just sat with the letter and the image of Lila, a daughter he didn't know, a life Raya had kept from him. The anger had faded to a low burn, but the confusion remained, tangled with something new. Fear. Fear of meeting her, of failing her, of facing the man he'd been when Raya left. The SUV stopped at his building, but he barely noticed, lost in the question that had no answer. Who am I to her? Morning broke, gray and restless, mirroring the churn inside him. He dressed, dark jeans, a gray sweater, nothing flashy, nothing to hide behind. The mirror showed a man fraying at the edges, shadows under his eyes, jaw tight with unresolved hurt. He slipped Raya's letter into his pocket, a habit now, and headed out. Marcus didn't ask questions, just drove to Central Park, the silence heavy with understanding. The path to the pond felt shorter today, the air sharper. Nolan's steps slowed as the bench came into view. Raya was there, standing this time, her coat a soft green against the dull sky. She turned as he approached, her eyes catching his, steady but wary. No Lila, just her and the space between them crackling with everything unsaid. You came, she said, her voice low, like she hadn't been sure. He stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, the letter's weight grounding him. Why didn't you tell me? The question burst out, rough with the anger he'd tried to bury. 3 years, Raya. You had no right to keep her from me. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. Would you have changed if I did? She shot back, her voice sharp, cutting through his defenses. Or would you have just bought your way out, like always? The words hit hard, a truth he couldn't dodge. He stepped closer, his voice dropping, raw with emotion. You didn't give me a chance. You decided for me. For us. For her, Raya's eyes flashed, but there was pain behind the fire. I was drowning, Nolan. You were gone. Meetings, deals, your empire. I couldn't raise a child in that. I couldn't raise her with a ghost. He wanted to argue, to say he would have been there, but the lie wouldn't come. 3 years ago, he'd been consumed, blind to her, to himself. You still should have told me, he said, quieter now, the anger fraying into something heavier. She's mine, too. Raya's gaze softened, just for a moment. I know, she whispered. That's why I'm here now. Before he could respond, a small figure stepped out from behind her, half hidden by her coat. Not a girl, but a boy, small, maybe 4, with dark curls and eyes that stopped Nolan cold. His eyes. Raya's curls. The boy clutched a toy truck, his gaze flicking between them, curious but shy. This is Zion, Raya said, her voice steady but thick with meaning. She rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. Zion, this is Nolan. Nolan's breath caught, the world narrowing to the boy in front of him. Zion, not Lila, a son. The letter had said Lila, a daughter, but here was a boy, real and breathing, staring up at him. His mind reeled, questions piling up. Had Raya lied? Was there another child? But Zion's eyes held him, wide and gentle, a mirror of his own in a way that stole his voice. "Hey," Nolan managed, crouching to Zion's level, his throat tight. "Nice truck." Zion tilted his head, a small smile breaking through. "It's a dump truck," he said, his voice soft but clear. "It carries dirt." Nolan's chest ached, a laugh breaking free despite himself. "Yeah? That's a good one. You like building stuff?" Zion nodded, stepping closer, his shyness easing. "I make castles, big ones, but they fall down sometimes." "Castles are tough," Nolan said, his eyes burning. "But you keep trying, right?" "Yeah?" Zion's smile widened, and Nolan felt something shift, a piece of his heart cracking open. This boy, smart, gentle, his, captured him in a way he hadn't expected, like a light cutting through the fog. He stood, looking at Raya, his voice low. "Zion," the letter said Lila. Her face tightened, a flicker of guilt crossing her eyes. I couldn't risk you saying no. Lila's a name I used to protect him, to keep this moment safe. I'm sorry." The confession stung, another layer of trust broken, but Zion's presence dulled the edge. "You should have told me the truth," he said, but the fight was gone, replaced by the boy watching them both. "I know," Raya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared. I still am." Nolan looked at Zion, now crouched by the bench, rolling his truck along the ground, humming softly. Scared didn't begin to cover it. He was terrified, of failing, of hurting this kid, of opening a door he couldn't close. But walking away wasn't an option, not anymore. "What now?" he asked, his eyes still on Zion. "What do you want from me?" Raya followed his gaze, her expression softening. "I want him to know you. Not the billionaire, not the headlines. You, if you're ready." He swallowed, the weight of it settling in. Ready wasn't the word, he was a mess, raw and unmoored, but Zion's quiet hum pulled him forward. "I want to try," he said, the words rough but true. "For him." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek, quickly brushed away. "Tomorrow, then. Same time. We'll start slow." Zion looked up, sensing the shift. "Are you coming back?" he asked Nolan, his voice small but direct. Nolan crouched again, meeting his son's eyes. "Yeah, buddy, I'm coming back." Zion's smile was a gift, bright and unguarded, and Nolan felt it lodge somewhere deep, a promise he couldn't break. Raya took Zion's hand, her gaze lingering on Nolan, heavy with questions neither could answer yet. "Tomorrow," she said, then turned, leading Zion down the path. Nolan watched them go, the boy's truck swinging in his grip, Raya's steps steady but slow, like she was carrying more than she showed. The park hummed around him, kids shouting, birds skimming the pond, but he was rooted, caught in the gravity of what just happened. A son. Zion. Not Lila, not a daughter, but a boy who'd already claimed a piece of him. He pulled the letter from his pocket, its words now a half-truth, a shield Raya had used to protect this moment. Why the lie? Why Zion's name hidden? The questions gnawed, but they didn't change the pull he felt, the need to know his son, to be more than the man Raya left. Tomorrow was a chance, fragile and terrifying, and he wouldn't let it slip. Nolan stood by the pond, the echo of Zion's voice. "Are you coming back?" Lingering like a pulse in the quiet. Raya and the boy had vanished down the path, her green coat a fleeting color against the gray park. His son. Not Lila, but Zion, with his gentle smile and toy truck, had cracked something open in Nolan, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Yet Raya's lie, the letter's false name, the years of silence gnawed at him, a wound that wouldn't close. He pulled the letter from his pocket, its creases worn from his grip, and stared at her handwriting. Why hide Zion's name? What else wasn't she telling him? The questions churned, but beneath them was something heavier, a longing for the Raya he'd known, the one he'd loved before it all fell apart. He turned from the bench, the city's hum pulling him back to the present, but his mind drifted, tugged by a memory sharper than the morning's chill. 10 years ago, a beach in Malibu, where it all began. The past reached for him, vivid and unyielding, and he let it come. The tech retreat was a blur of egos and ambition, coders pitching apps, investors sniffing for the next big thing, and Nolan, 32, hungry, pitching his startup to anyone who'd listen. The beach stretched golden under a July sun, waves crashing like applause, but he barely noticed, his focus razor-sharp on closing deals. He was nobody then, just a guy with a laptop and a plan, scraping by on charm and grit. Raya was different. A PR intern, 26, all sharp wit and quiet fire, she moved through the retreat like she didn't care who noticed her. Nolan did. He caught her during a break, standing by a food truck, her sundress catching the breeze, her curls wild from the salt air. She was scribbling notes, muttering to herself about a client's bad logo. "Need a better pen?" he'd said, leaning against the truck, half smirking. She glanced up, unimpressed. "Need a better line?" Her hazel eyes held his, daring him to try again. He laughed, caught off guard. "Fair, I'm Nolan, the guy with the app nobody gets yet." "Raya," she said, tucking her notebook under her arm. "The girl fixing your pitch before you crash and burn." He raised a brow. "My pitch is fine." "It's boring." She didn't blink. "You're selling a story, not a spreadsheet. Make them feel it." He stared, hooked by her bluntness, the way she saw through him without flinching. They talked for an hour, his app, her art, the way she ditched a law degree to chase something real. She was electric, her laugh pulling him out of his own head, and by the time the sun dipped low, he knew he'd find her again. The retreat's final night brought a rainstorm, sudden and fierce, scattering the crowd under tents. Nolan found Raya by the shore, barefoot, her dress soaked, laughing as the rain pelted her. "You're gonna catch a cold," he called, jogging out, his shirt clinging to his skin. "Then warm me up," she teased, her eyes bright, daring him again. He stepped closer, the rain blurring the world around them. "Careful," he said, voice low. "I might take you seriously." She tilted her chin, water streaming down her face. "Maybe I want you to." He kissed her then, rain mixing with salt, her lips soft but fierce, matching his hunger. It was lightning, sharp, alive, a moment that burned itself into him. They stood there, soaked and breathless, the storm raging, and he knew he'd never let her go. They married 10 months later, a small ceremony on that same beach, her in white, him promising forever. For a while it was real, nights tangled in sheets, her painting in their tiny apartment, him coding until dawn with her coffee keeping him sane. She believed in him, saw the man he could be, not just the one he was. But success came fast, a tidal wave he couldn't outrun. His app exploded, investors called. Offices sprouted in 3 cities. He chased it, every deal, every win, telling himself it was for them. Raya faded behind his ambition. Dinners became emails, her art shows missed for board meetings. She'd beg him to slow down, to see her, but he'd snap, "This is how we build something, Raya. This is for us." Her eyes would dim, her voice quiet, and he'd hate himself but keep running. The fights grew, her accusing him of choosing money over her, him yelling that she didn't get what it took. By the end, silence was their language, broken only by her leaving. The divorce papers signed on that Central Park bench. Nolan blinked, the memory dissolving into the park's gray present. The pond rippled, a light rain starting to fall, mirroring that long-ago storm. He was back in today. Zion's face fresh in his mind, Raya's lie a new scar. The man he'd been, the one who kissed her in the rain, was buried under years of choices he couldn't undo. But Zion, and maybe Raya, were pulling him back, forcing him to face what he'd lost. He walked to the bench, rain dotting his jacket, and sat where Raya had stood hours ago. His phone buzzed. Marcus, probably, checking in. But he ignored it. The past was a weight, but it wasn't gone. Raya had loved him once, enough to marry him, enough to carry his child. Zion was proof of that, a bridge between who they'd been and who they might be. But the lie, Lila's name, Zion's truth, hung heavy. What else was she hiding? Why now, after all this time? The rain thickened, cold against his skin, but he didn't move. Tomorrow he'd see them again. Zion's smile, Raya's guarded eyes. He'd loved her once, fiercely, and part of him still did, buried deep. But love wasn't enough then, and it might not be now. He needed answers, not just for Zion, but for himself. Who was he without her? Who could he be with them? He stood, the bench slick under his hand, and started back to the SUV. The city waited, his empire unchanged, but inside everything was shifting. Raya's face in the rain, Zion's quiet trust. They were threads of a life he'd thought was gone. Tomorrow he'd pull at them, not knowing if they'd hold or break. Nolan walked away from the bench, rain soaking his jacket, the memory of Raya's kiss in that long-ago storm clinging to him like the damp air. Zion's face, those curls, those eyes, anchored him to the present, a tether to a future he couldn't yet grasp. The lie about Lila's name stung, but the truth of Zion's existence, of Raya's choice to bring him back into her life, stirred something deeper. Hope, fragile and untested. The city blurred around him as he climbed into the SUV, Marcus's quiet glance meeting his in the rear view. "Home?" Marcus asked. "Not yet," Nolan said, his voice steady despite the churn inside. "Take me to the office." He needed to think, to ground himself in the one place where control still made sense. But even there, spreadsheets and emails couldn't silence the questions. Why had Raya hidden Zion's name? What did she want now? And who was he to this boy, this son he'd only just met? The office was dark, the hum of servers the only sound. He sat at his desk, the skyline glittering beyond the glass, and pulled out the letter again. Raya's words, "I needed you to know he exists," felt like a challenge, a door cracked open. Tomorrow he'd see them again, and he'd have to decide how far to step through. Morning came, sharp and clear, the rain gone, leaving a crisp edge to the April air. Nolan arrived at Central Park early, his pulse uneven, a mix of nerves and resolve. Raya was already there, Zion beside her, kicking at pebbles on the path. The boy's face lit up when he saw Nolan, a smile that hit harder than any boardroom win. "Hey, Nolan," Zion called, waving his toy truck. "I brought my digger today. Want to see?" Nolan crouched, his grin real despite the weight in his chest. "A digger, huh? That's serious business. Show me what it does." Zion launched into an explanation, his small hands guiding the toy through the dirt, piling pebbles with precision. Nolan followed his lead, clumsy at first, his fingers too big for the tiny truck. But Zion's patience, his gentle corrections, his laugh, eased the awkwardness. Raya watched from the bench, her expression unreadable but softer than yesterday. Her eyes catching the way Nolan leaned in, listening to Zion's every word. They spent the morning together, moving from the path to a grassy clearing where Zion insisted on building a castle out of sticks and stones. Nolan fumbled, his suit jacket discarded on the grass, his hands smeared with dirt. "You're not bad at this," Zion said, squinting up at him. "But you gotta make the walls stronger." "Stronger, huh?" Nolan chuckled, stacking a twig with exaggerated care. "Like this?" Zion nodded, serious. "Yeah, so it doesn't fall." Raya joined them, kneeling to add a pebble to the structure. Her fingers brushed Nolan's, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him, stirring memories of their early days. Her paint-stained hands, their laughter in cramped apartments. She didn't pull away, but her eyes stayed on the castle, guarded. "You're good with him," she said quietly, when Zion ran to fetch more sticks. "Better than I expected." Nolan glanced at her, the compliment catching him off guard. "I'm winging it," he admitted, his voice low. "Half the time I'm terrified I'll mess this up." Her lips curved, a faint smile that felt like a gift. "You're here. That's more than I thought you'd give." The words hung between them, heavy with their shared history. He wanted to ask about the lie, about Lila's name, but Zion's return, a triumphant handful of twigs, stopped him. The morning stretched into afternoon, filled with small moments. Zion's chatter, Nolan's clumsy attempts at play, Raya's quiet presence knitting them together. Days turned into weeks, Raya allowing Nolan more time with Zion, park visits, ice cream runs, a trip to the aquarium where Zion pressed his nose to the glass, mesmerized by sharks. Nolan was still clumsy, second-guessing every move, but Zion's trust was a balm, his laughter erasing the years of distance. Raya watched, her walls softening, her eyes lingering on Nolan when she thought he didn't notice. He saw it, though, the way she smiled when he carried Zion on his shoulders, the way her shoulders relaxed when he asked about her art. One evening, Raya invited him to her apartment, a small but warm space in Brooklyn, filled with her paintings and Zion's toys. Nolan arrived with a pizza, Zion's favorite, and the boys' excitement filled the room. They ate on the floor, Zion telling wild stories about his digger saving the world. When the boy's eyes grew heavy, Raya carried him to bed, leaving Nolan in the living room, the quiet settling like a blanket. She returned, her hair loose, her sweater soft against her frame. She sat across from him on the couch, a mug of tea in her hands, the silence intimate, fragile. Nolan felt the weight of the moment, the years between them shrinking. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, "for letting me in." For Zion, her eyes met his, searching. "He loves you," she said simply. "I didn't expect it to happen so fast." Nolan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the question he'd held back finally spilling out. "If you were here now, in this moment, would you still walk away?" Raya's breath caught, her mug trembling in her hands. Her eyes glistened, a tear slipping free, and she didn't brush it away. "No," she whispered, the word raw, unguarded. "I wouldn't." The air shifted, charged with the weight of her answer. Nolan moved closer, drawn by the pull he'd never outrun. She didn't pull back. Their lips met, soft at first, then deeper, a kiss that carried the ache of lost years, the hope of something new. Her hands found his face, his wrapped around her, and for a moment the world was just them, Raya's warmth, her heartbeat, the taste of her tears. They parted, breathless, her forehead resting against his. "Nolan," she murmured, "this doesn't fix everything." "I know," he said, his voice rough, "but it's a start." She nodded, her hand still on his cheek, and they sat there, the quiet holding them close. Zion's soft snores drifted from the next room, a reminder of what they'd built, what they could still become. The lie about Lila's name, the years of pain. They weren't gone, but they were lighter now, overshadowed by the boy sleeping nearby, and the woman in his arms. Outside, Brooklyn hummed, the city unaware of the bridge they'd crossed. Tomorrow they'd face more questions: Zion's future, Raya's trust, Nolan's place in their lives. But tonight, they were enough. Nolan lingered in Raya's apartment, the warmth of her kiss still on his lips, her words, "I wouldn't," echoing in the quiet. They sat close, her hand resting lightly on his, Zion's snores a soft rhythm from the next room. The moment felt fragile, a bridge rebuilt on shaky ground, but real. For the first time in years, Nolan saw a path forward, not clear, not easy, but possible. Raya's eyes, soft but searching, held questions neither could answer yet. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice low, a promise to her and himself. She nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Slow," she murmured, "for Zion." "For all of us," he added, squeezing her hand. The city hummed beyond her windows, Brooklyn's pulse steady, unaware of the shift inside these walls. They talked late into the night, small things like Zion's love for dinosaurs, and bigger ones like her art shows, his regrets. When he left, the cool air hit him like a reset, but the warmth stayed, carrying him home. The next few days were a blur of cautious hope. Nolan met Raya and Zion at the park, then a museum, each moment with his son stitching him back together. Zion's laugh, his endless questions. Why do clouds move? Can we build a rocket? Felt like a gift Nolan didn't deserve. Raya watched, her guard lowering, her smiles more frequent. He caught himself wanting to hold her again, but he held back, honoring her pace. Still, the lie about Lila's name nagged, a loose thread he hadn't pulled. Why hide Zion's truth? What else lingered behind her choices? That question sharpened the morning his phone buzzed relentlessly, texts and calls piling up before dawn. His assistant's name flashed first. "Nolan, you need to see this. Now." A link followed, and he clicked, his stomach dropping. A video, grainy but unmistakable, played on a tabloid site. Raya in Central Park, her voice sharp, confronting him. "Would you have changed? Or just bought your way out?" His own words, raw and angry, followed. "You didn't give me a chance." The footage cut abruptly, captioned with venom. "Billionaire's ex sparks custody war over secret child." The article spun a vicious tale, Raya as the scheming ex, Nolan as the blindsided mogul, Zion reduced to a pawn in a public feud. He rewatched it, his pulse hammering. The park, their second meeting. Someone had been there, recording, twisting their pain into clickbait. Comments flooded in, vile speculation, accusations, lies. His phone buzzed again, board members, PR team, all in panic mode. He ignored them, dialing Raya. She picked up on the first ring, her voice tight. "Nolan, what's happening? My sister just sent me a link." "I saw it," he cut in, pacing his penthouse, the skyline gray beyond the glass. "I don't know who got that video, but I'm handling it. Handling it." Her tone sharpened, fear edging in. "They're saying I'm after your money, Nolan. They're dragging Zion's name into this. He's 4. I know," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Stay with him. Keep him off screens. I'll find out who did this." He hung up, his mind racing. The video was too precise, too perfectly timed. Someone knew where they'd be. Someone close. His thoughts snagged on Julian, his oldest friend, the one who'd known about Zion, who'd kept Raya's secret. Julian, whose eyes had tightened when Nolan mentioned meeting his son, whose loyalty had always felt like a double-edged blade. Nolan drove to Julian's office, a sleek loft in Soho, bypassing the receptionist with a glare. Julian was at his desk, scrolling his phone, his face calm until he saw Nolan. "You look rough," Julian said, leaning back. "What's this about?" You know damn well, Nolan said, slamming the door. He pulled up the video on his phone, shoving it toward Julian. This. You were the only one who knew about Raya and me meeting. You did this. Julian's brow lifted, but his expression stayed cool. You think I leaked your dirty laundry? That's a stretch, even for you. Don't lie to me, Nolan snapped, leaning over the desk. You've been jealous since I started winning, Julian. My company, my life. You couldn't stand it. So you twist this, hurt Raya, hurt my kid. To what? Knock me down? Julian's calm cracked, a flash of something, anger, guilt, crossing his face. Jealous? He stood, matching Nolan's height. You're the one who threw it all away, Nolan. Raya, your family, for what? A penthouse and headlines. I protected her when you wouldn't. I kept her secret because she deserved better than you. Then why leak it? Nolan's voice was low, dangerous. Why now? Julian hesitated just a beat, but it was enough. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said finally, his voice quieter. I recorded it, thought it'd push you to wake up, see what you were losing. But it got out. Someone at the outlet got hold of it, spun it. I didn't... You didn't what? Nolan cut in, disbelief burning through him. You filmed us, Julian. You betrayed us both. For what? To teach me a lesson? Julian looked away, his jaw tight. I cared about her, Nolan. More than you ever did. The admission hung heavy, a truth Nolan hadn't wanted to see. Julian's feelings for Raya, buried under years of friendship, had fueled this. Jealousy, not just of Nolan's success, but of his chance to rebuild what Julian could never have. Nolan stepped back, the fight draining out. You're done, he said, voice cold. Stay away from me. From them. He walked out, Julian's silence louder than any defense. Outside, the city roared, cameras flashing, reporters shouting his name. The media storm had erupted, headlines screaming about custody battles, secret kids, Raya's motives. His phone buzzed with alerts. Stock dips, boardroom panic, PR scrambling. But none of it mattered as much as Zion's name in the mud, Raya's voice twisted into lies. He called her again, weaving through the crowd. Raya, it was Julian, he said when she answered. He leaked it or started it. I'm fixing this. Her breath hitched, a pause heavy with hurt. Julian. Why? He's jealous. Of me, of us. I don't know how deep it goes. Nolan ducked into an alley, the noise fading. I'm sorry. I didn't see it coming. Neither did I, she said, her voice small. Zion saw a headline, Nolan. He asked if I'm taking him away from you. Nolan's chest tightened, Zion's face flashing in his mind, those eyes, his trust. Tell him it's not true, he said. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. She didn't answer right away, the silence thick. I want to believe you, she said finally, but it's bigger than us now. I know, he said, his voice rough, but we'll face it, together. He hung up, the storm still raging, reporters, headlines, Julian's betrayal. But Zion and Raya were his anchor, their faces sharper than the chaos. He'd fight for them, not with money or power, but with the man he was becoming, the one they needed him to be. Nolan stood in the alley, the city's chaos a dull roar beyond the brick walls, his phone still warm from Raya's voice. Zion asked if I'm taking him away from you. The words cut deeper than the headlines, sharper than Julian's betrayal. The media storm raged, reporters clawing for sound bites, tabloids spinning lies about custody wars. Zion's name dragged through it all. Julian's confession burned in him, a mix of jealousy and sabotage that had cracked open Nolan's world. But it wasn't just Julian. It was Nolan himself, the man he'd been, the one Raya hadn't trusted, the one who'd built an empire but lost her and Zion in the process. He leaned against the wall, rain starting to speckle the pavement, and felt the weight of a choice he couldn't outrun. He dialed his PR lead, cutting through her frantic plan. "No counterattack," he said, his voice steady despite the churn inside. "No lawyers, no leaks. I'm handling this my way." She argued, but he hung up, already moving toward the SUV where Marcus waited, his face a question Nolan didn't answer. "Downtown," he said. "I need to think." The drive was a blur, Manhattan's lights streaking like warnings. Zion's smile, Raya's tearful "I wouldn't." Their kiss, they anchored him, pulling him past the noise. Julian's video had exposed their rawest moment, twisted it into a spectacle, but Nolan saw it for what it was, a chance to be different. Not the billionaire who fought dirty, but the man Zion deserved, the one Raya might believe in again. Morning broke, harsh and unrelenting, the city pulsing with the scandal's fallout. Nolan's penthouse was a fortress under siege, emails piling up, board members demanding answers, his stock ticker flashing red. He ignored it all, sitting at his desk with a legal pad, drafting words that felt foreign. Not a defense, not a strategy, but a truth. His phone buzzed. Raya, this time, her voice tight with worry. "Nolan, they're outside my building. Reporters. Zion's scared." His grip tightened, guilt flaring. "Stay inside," he said. "I'm ending this today. Trust me." A pause, heavy with their history. "I'm trying," she said, softer. "For him." "For us," he added, and the line went quiet, her breath the only sound before she hung up. He turned back to the pad, his pen moving faster now, each word a step away from the man he'd been. By noon, he'd called his assistant, his voice calm but final. "Schedule a press conference, 2 hours, no questions, just a statement, and get me the board chairs for Apex and Triton. Now." The calls were brutal, board members bristling, accusing him of tanking their investments, of letting personal drama bleed into business. He listened, then spoke evenly. "I'm resigning, effective today. You'll have my letters by tonight." Their protests faded to static. He was already gone, focused on the statement in his hand, the one thing he could control. The press conference was set in a stark hotel ballroom, cameras flashing like gunfire as Nolan stepped to the podium. No suit today, just a gray sweater, jeans, a man stripped of armor. The crowd hushed, hungry for blood or redemption. He unfolded his paper, his voice steady, carrying the weight of every choice that led here. "I've spent my life building. Companies, deals, a name people recognize," he began, his eyes scanning the faceless crowd. "But I've learned there's something worth more than all of it. Family. My son, Zion, is 4 years old. He likes dump trucks and building castles. He doesn't deserve to have his name twisted into lies. His mother, Raya, is a woman who's fought to give him a life of love. Not headlines. She deserves peace, not pressure." Murmurs rippled, but he pressed on, his voice growing firmer. "The video you've seen, it was a private moment, stolen and spun to hurt us. I could fight it, drag this through courts, bury it in lawsuits. But a child needs love, not lawyers. So I'm stepping back, resigning from my boards, pulling out of the noise. I'm choosing them, and I'm asking you to let us heal." He paused, the room silent, cameras still. "That's all," he said, folding the paper. He walked off, ignoring the shouted questions, the flashbulbs burning his back. Outside, the air hit him, cool and sharp, and he exhaled, the weight lighter but not gone. Raya saw it live, her TV flickering in the dim Brooklyn apartment, Zion playing with blocks in the corner, oblivious. Her hand covered her mouth, eyes wide, as Nolan's words sank in. A child needs love, not lawsuits. She'd braced for a fight, for the billionaire to swing back with power and money, like always. But this was new. Resigning, stepping away, for them. Her chest tightened, a mix of disbelief and something softer, something like hope. She texted him, fingers trembling. Saw it. You meant it? His reply came fast. Every word. Can I see you? She glanced at Zion, his small hands stacking blocks, and typed, Tonight. My place. Bring dinner. Hours later, Nolan arrived, a bag of Thai takeout in hand, his face tired but open. Zion ran to him, hugging his legs, and Nolan's laugh broke the tension, a sound Raya hadn't heard in years. They ate on the floor, Zion chattering about a turtle he'd seen at the park, Nolan listening like it was the only story that mattered. Raya watched, her heart caught between the man she'd left and the one sitting here, clumsy but present. When Zion's eyes drooped, Raya tucked him into bed, his truck clutched tight. She returned to Nolan, the apartment quiet, the takeout boxes cleared. He stood by the window, looking out at Brooklyn's scattered lights, his shoulders carrying a weight she recognized. Doubt, maybe fear. You stunned me today, she said, sitting on the couch, her voice low. Resigning. I didn't think you could walk away from that world. He turned, his eyes meeting hers, raw and unguarded. I didn't think I could either, he admitted, crossing to sit beside her. But I kept seeing Zion's face, hearing your voice in that video, twisted into something it wasn't. I couldn't let it keep hurting you. She studied him, searching for the catch, the angle. What's next then? You can't just stop being you. I'm not stopping, he said, his voice steady. I'm choosing. Less boards, less noise, more time. For him, for us, if you'll let me. Her throat tightened, tears pricking. Nolan, She paused, gathering the words. I didn't expect this. Not from you. He leaned closer, his hand brushing hers, tentative. I'm not the man I was, Raya. I don't know if I'm enough yet, but I'm trying. For real this time. She looked at their hands, his fingers warm against hers, and felt the years of hurt shift, not gone, but quieter. I see it, she said softly. Zion sees it too. That's why I let you in tonight. He exhaled, a small smile breaking through. Thank you, he said, the words heavy with everything unspoken, regret, hope, the fragile start of trust. They sat in the quiet, the city humming beyond, Zion snores a soft anchor. Raya leaned against him just a little, her shoulder touching his. It wasn't everything, not yet, but it was enough for now. The media storm would fade, Julian's betrayal a scar they'd outgrow. Nolan had changed, not in headlines or deals, but in the small real ways that mattered, showing up, listening, choosing them. Tomorrow they'd face more, Zion's questions, the world's noise, the truth of Lila's name still unanswered. But tonight, they were here, together, building something new from the ashes of what was. Nolan sat beside Raya in her Brooklyn apartment, the warmth of her shoulder against his, a quiet anchor in the fading light. Her words, I see it, Zion sees it too, settled into him. A fragile trust he vowed not to break. The media storm still churned outside, headlines and speculation clawing for attention. But here, with takeout boxes cleared and Zion's snores drifting from the next room, they'd carved out something real. Nolan's statement, his resignation from 2 boards, had stunned Raya, and her letting him in tonight felt like a door cracked open. Yet questions lingered. The lie about Lila's name, the years of silence, Julian's betrayal. They weren't erased, just softened, waiting for answers neither could force yet. He glanced at her, her face softened by the lamplight, and wanted to ask about Lila, about why she'd hidden Zion's truth. But her hand in his, steady but tentative, stopped him. Tomorrow, he said instead, his voice low. Can I take Zion to the park? Just us. Her lips curved, a small smile breaking through. He'd love that, but don't let him eat 3 ice creams again. Nolan chuckled, the sound easing the weight in his chest. 2, Max. Promise. They laughed, the moment light but real, a step towards something neither could name yet. When he left, the city's pulse felt distant, his heart tethered to the small apartment behind him. The next morning, Raya woke early, the apartment quiet except for Zion's soft breathing. She stood by his bed, watching his chest rise and fall, his toy truck clutched tight. Nolan's statement replayed in her mind. A child needs love, not lawsuits. And her heart twisted, caught between disbelief and a hope she hadn't let herself feel in years. He was trying, showing up for Zion, for her, in ways the old Nolan never could. But trust was a slow build, and the lie she'd told, calling Zion Lila in the letter, still hung between them, a truth she owed but wasn't ready to face. She needed clarity, a way to untangle the past from the present. Her thoughts turned to Aunt Melinda, her godmother, the woman who'd raised her when her own parents couldn't. Melinda's brownstone in Harlem, filled with gospel music and the smell of sage, had always been her refuge. If anyone could help her see straight, it was her. Raya bundled Zion into a jacket, promising a stop for hot chocolate, and took the subway uptown. The city blurred past, vendors hawking pretzels, kids dodging through crowds, while her mind churned. Nolan's change felt real, but could it last? And why now, after all this time, had she reached out with that letter? The answer felt close, tied to something bigger than herself, but she couldn't grasp it alone. Melinda's brownstone stood unchanged, its red stoop worn smooth by years of visitors. Zion ran ahead, ringing the bell, and Melinda opened the door, her gray braids swept back, her smile wide enough to light the block. "There's my boy," she said, scooping Zion into a hug before pulling Raya close. "And you, baby, been too long." Inside, the air smelled of coffee and cornbread, a radio humming old hymns low. Zion darted to the living room where Melinda kept a box of wooden trains, leaving the women at the kitchen table. Melinda poured tea, her eyes sharp despite her 70 years, reading Raya like a book. "You got that look," she said, sliding a mug over. "What's weighing you?" Raya traced the mug's rim, the words slow to come. "It's Nolan," she said finally. "He's different. Stepped down from his boards, said he's choosing us, Zion, me. I didn't think he had it in him." Melinda raised a brow, sipping her tea. "And you're wondering if it's real, or if he's just playing a part?" Raya nodded, her throat tight. "I kept Zion from him, Aunt Mel. 3 years. I told myself it was to protect him, but maybe I was scared Nolan would break us both. Now he's here, trying, and I don't know if I can trust it, or if I deserve to." Melinda's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "You carried that boy alone, Raya. That's strength, not shame. But holding on to fear, it'll steal what God's trying to give you." Raya's eyes stung, the weight of her choices pressing in. "I lied to him," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the letter, I called Zion Lila. I was so afraid he'd say no, or worse, try to take him. I thought a girl's name might soften him, make him listen. I don't know why I did it." Melinda leaned back, her gaze softening but firm. "You did what you thought you had to, baby. But secrets don't heal. You got to tell him, clean slate or it'll fester." "I know," Raya said, wiping her eyes. "But it's not just that. Writing that letter, it wasn't just me. She paused, the memory sharp, pulling her back to Easter morning. "I asked God for a sign, Aunt Mel. I was lost wondering if I'd done right by Zion, keeping Nolan away. I prayed hard for something to show me the way. And that day I found myself writing. I didn't plan it, didn't even think it through. Just wrote and sent it." Melinda's eyes widened, a slow smile breaking through. "A letter on Easter," she said, her voice warm with wonder. Baby, you don't get a clearer sign than that. Resurrection Day, new life, new chances. You think that was just you? Raya's breath caught, the weight of it sinking in. She'd felt it then, a pull beyond herself, but hearing Melinda say it made it real. You think God put that in me? To reach out? I know he did, Melinda said, her voice firm. You prayed, and he answered. Not with a burning bush, but with your own hand, your own heart. That letter brought Nolan back, didn't it? Brought you here, talking to me, with that boy playing in my house, happy as can be. Raya glanced toward the living room where Zion's laughter mixed with the clatter of trains. Her chest ached, a mix of guilt and gratitude. But what if I mess it up? What if Nolan's change isn't enough, or I'm not enough? Melinda stood, pulling Raya to her feet. Enough of that. Come on, we're gonna pray. She led Raya to the small altar in the corner, a wooden table draped with white cloth, candles flickering beside a worn Bible. Zion, sensing the shift, wandered over, curling against Raya's side. Melinda knelt, her hands raised, and Raya followed, Zion's small hand in hers. Lord, Melinda began, her voice strong, filling the room, we come to you with heavy hearts, but open ones. You see Raya, carrying so much, love, fear, hope. You see Zion, a blessing beyond measure, and Nolan trying to find his way. You gave her a sign, Lord, that letter on Easter, and we thank you for your hand in it. Guide them now. Show them how to trust, how to heal. Let your love bind what's broken, and keep this child safe in your light. Raya's tears fell, silent but steady, her hand tightening around Zion's. She added her own prayer, soft but fierce. Help me be honest, God. Help me give Zion what he needs. Both of us, together, if that's your will. Zion's voice piped up, small but clear. And help Nolan come to the park tomorrow. He said he'd bring a kite. Raya's laugh broke through her tears, Melinda's joining in, the sound warm and grounding. They rose, the candles still flickering, and Melinda pulled them both into a hug. You're gonna be all right, she said, her voice a promise. All three of you. Back at the table, Raya sipped her tea, lighter now, the weight of the signs settling into her. Easter. The letter. Nolan's change. It wasn't chance, it was purpose, a path she'd been led to walk. She owed Nolan the truth about the lie, about her fear, but she felt stronger now, ready to face it. Zion climbed into her lap, his head against her chest, and she held him close, her eyes on the window where Harlem's lights blinked like stars. That night, she texted Nolan. Zion's excited for the kite. Can we talk after? Just us. His reply was quick. Anything you want. I'm there. She smiled, the words a small bridge to tomorrow, where she'd tell him everything. Lila, the fear, the sign, and trust that he'd meet her halfway. The city hummed on, unaware of the prayer that had shifted her heart, of the letter that had started it all. Raya tucked Zion into bed, his truck beside him, and stood by the window. The skyline a reminder of Nolan's world, now bending toward hers. God's sign had brought them here, and whatever came next, truth, trust, maybe love, she'd walk it with Zion's hand in hers, and maybe Nolan's too. Raya stood by her apartment window, the Harlem skyline a scattering of lights against the night. Zion slept soundly, his toy truck tucked under his arm, unaware of the shift in her heart. Aunt Melinda's words, "You don't get a clearer sign than that," echoed, grounding her in the truth of the Easter letter. It wasn't just her hand that wrote it. It was a pull beyond herself, a divine nudge that had brought Nolan back, changed into her life. The prayer they'd shared, Melinda's voice strong, Zion's small plea for a kite, had steadied her. She owed Nolan the truth about calling Zion Lila, about the fear that drove her to lie, and tomorrow after the park, she'd tell him. Her text to him, "Can we talk after?" "Just us," was a step toward that, and his quick reply, "Anything you want." "I'm there," felt like a promise she could lean into. She turned from the window, her apartment warm with the lingering scent of Melinda's cornbread, and felt a quiet resolve. The media storm still buzzed, reporters sniffing for more, Julian's betrayal a fresh scar, but it was distant now, drowned out by Zion's laugh, Nolan's steady gaze, the memory of their kiss. Tomorrow she'd watch Nolan fly a kite with their son, then lay bare her heart. For Zion, for herself, maybe for them. The city hummed on, but in her small corner, hope was taking root. The park was alive the next morning, April's breeze carrying the scent of blooming trees. Zion bounced ahead, clutching a bright red kite Nolan had brought, its tail flapping wildly. Raya walked beside Nolan, their steps in sync, her nerves tempered by Zion's excitement. "You sure you know how to fly that thing?" she teased, glancing at Nolan. He grinned, the lines around his eyes softening. "I've closed billion-dollar deals. A kite can't be harder." Zion tugged at his hand, impatient. "Come on, Nolan. It's gonna go so high." They found a clear spot by the pond, and Nolan knelt, showing Zion how to hold the string, his hands steady but gentle. Raya watched, her chest tightening at the sight. Nolan, once all sharp edges, now soft with their sun, laughing as the kite caught the wind and soared. The morning stretched, filled with Zion's cheers, Nolan's mock groans when the kite dipped, Raya's laughter joining theirs. For a moment, the world was just them. No headlines, no lies, just a family finding its rhythm. When Zion ran to chase a stray leaf, Raya turned to Nolan, her voice low. "He's happy with you. Really happy." Nolan's eyes met hers, raw and searching. "I'm happy too. More than I've been in years." He paused, his hand brushing hers, tentative. "I want this, Raya. Not just today. Every day." Her breath caught, the weight of his words pulling at her. She nodded, the truth about Lila heavy on her tongue, but Zion's return, a leaf proudly presented, held it back. "Tonight," she said softly. "We'll talk." After the park, Nolan took Zion for ice cream, giving Raya time to gather herself. Back home, she paced, rehearsing how she'd explain the lie, the fear that had gripped her when she wrote the letter. When Nolan arrived that evening, pizza in hand, Zion's chatter filled the apartment, a buffer against her nerves. They ate, played a board game Zion insisted on, and when his eyes grew heavy, Raya tucked him in, lingering by his bed, steadying herself. She found Nolan in the living room, standing by the window, his silhouette sharp against Brooklyn's glow. "You okay?" he asked, turning as she approached. "Yeah," she said, sitting on the couch, patting the space beside her. "But we need to talk." About the letter he sat, his gaze steady, bracing. "Lila," he said, the name a question, not an accusation. She nodded, her throat tight. "I lied. Zion's name. I called him Lila because I was scared. Scared you'd say no, or worse, try to take him with money, lawyers, all the things you used to control. I thought a girl's name might make you pause, listen. It was wrong, Nolan. I'm sorry." His jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed soft, searching hers. "Why didn't you trust me?" "I didn't trust us," she admitted, tears pricking. "We were so broken then. I couldn't risk him. But I see you now, really see you, and I know I should have told the truth." He exhaled, leaning back, processing. "It hurts," he said finally, his voice low. "But I get it. I wasn't someone you could lean on then. I'm trying to be now." "I know," she said, her hand finding his, squeezing. "And I'm trying too. For Zion. For whatever this is." He looked at her, a small smile breaking through. "This," he said, his thumb tracing her knuckles, is worth fighting for. The air shifted, lighter but charged, their hands still linked. Raya felt the pull of him, the man he was becoming, and leaned closer, their foreheads touching. "No more lies," she whispered. "No more," he agreed, and they sat there, the city's hum a backdrop to a promise neither could break. Days turned into weeks, the media storm fading as Nolan's statement sank in, his absence from headlines a quiet victory. Raya watched him with Zion, building forts, reading bedtime stories, his patience endless, and saw the man she'd loved in Malibu, now tempered by time, by loss. But her apartment felt small, the distance between Brooklyn and Nolan's Manhattan penthouse a reminder of their separate lives. Zion's questions, "Why don't we live with Nolan?" grew frequent, his small heart reaching for a family. One evening, after Zion's latest plea, Raya sat Nolan down, her voice steady but nervous. "Zion needs us together," she said. "Not just visits. I'm not saying forever, but what if I moved in? Temporarily. For him." Nolan's eyes widened, hope flickering. "You'd do that? Live with me?" "For Zion," she said, though her heart whispered more. "We try it, see if it works. Slow." "Slow," he agreed, his smile warm, unguarded. "But I'd love it. He'd love it." The move was quick, Raya packing just enough for her and Zion, leaving her paintings behind to keep it temporary. Nolan's penthouse, once sterile, came alive with Zion's toys, Raya's books, their laughter echoing off glass walls. Nolan scaled back meetings, coming home early to cook with Zion, to sit with Raya over coffee, their talks deepening, her art, his regrets, their shared dreams for their son. One night after Zion fell asleep mid-story, Raya and Nolan lingered in the living room, soft jazz drifting from a speaker, candles flickering on the coffee table. The city sparkled beyond the windows, but the room felt like theirs, warm, intimate. Nolan poured wine, his movements slow, deliberate, and handed her a glass, their fingers brushing. "You've made this place different," he said, his voice low, eyes locked on hers. "It's not just walls anymore." She smiled, sipping the wine, the warmth spreading. "Zion's mess helps," she teased, but her gaze softened. "You're different too. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe here." He set his glass down, stepping closer, his hand finding hers. "Do you feel safe?" She nodded, her throat tight, the truth spilling out. "More than I expected. With you, with us." The jazz swelled, a slow saxophone curling through the air, and Nolan's hand slid to her waist, pulling her gently closer. "Dance with me," he murmured, not a question but a need. She stepped into him, her arms around his neck, their bodies swaying, the candles casting soft shadows. His breath was warm against her temple, her cheek pressed to his chest, his heartbeat steady under her ear. The years of hurt, of silence melted into the rhythm, not gone but distant, overshadowed by this, his warmth, her trust, their shared breath. "Raya," he whispered, his lips brushing her ear, "I've never stopped loving you." Her eyes stung, but she didn't pull back, lifting her face to meet his. "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I love you too." Still. Their lips met, soft at first, a question answered, then deeper, urgent, a hunger tempered by tenderness. The kiss carried everything, Malibu's rain, Central Park's pain, Zion's laughter, this new, fragile hope. His hands framed her face, hers slid under his shirt, skin to skin, a spark that hadn't dimmed. They moved together, shedding layers, not rushed but inevitable, guided by the music, the candlelight, the weight of their reunited souls. On the couch, they came together. No performance, no pretense, just raw emotional connection, each touch a promise, each sigh a release. Her fingers traced the lines of his back, his lips found the curve of her neck, and they moved as one, slow, deliberate, rebuilding what time had broken. When they stilled, breathless, her head against his chest, the jazz faded to a hum, the candles burned low. "This feels like home," Raya whispered, her voice soft, unguarded, a truth she hadn't planned to say. Nolan's arms tightened around her, his breath warm against her hair. "It is," he said, the words a vow. "You are." They lay there, the city silent beyond, Zion sleeping down the hall, their world small but whole. The lie about Lila, Julian's betrayal, the media's noise. They were shadows now, outshone by this moment, by the family they were becoming. Tomorrow they'd face more. Zion's questions, the temporary move, the truth still unfolding. But tonight, they were enough. Their love, a new chapter written in candlelight and jazz. Raya lay against Nolan, the candlelight flickering low, the soft jazz a fading hum in the penthouse. Her whispered words, "This feels like home," hung in the air, a truth that anchored them both. His arms tightened around her, his breath warm against her hair, and for the first time in years, the weight of their past felt lighter, not gone but bearable. Zion slept down the hall, his presence a quiet bridge between their old wounds and this new chapter. The lie about Lila's name, the media storm, Julian's betrayal. They were still there, shadows at the edges, but tonight in the glow of their reunion, they couldn't touch this moment. Raya traced a finger along Nolan's chest, her heart steady, and murmured, "We're gonna be okay, aren't we?" He kissed her forehead, his voice low. "Yeah, we are." The promise felt real, a vow to Zion, to her, to himself. They stayed there, tangled in each other, until sleep pulled them under, the city's pulse a distant lullaby. Morning came softly, sunlight slicing through the blinds, warming the room. Zion's laughter woke them, his small feet pattering as he burst in, clutching his truck. "Nolan, can we make pancakes?" he asked, climbing onto the bed, oblivious to the shift in his parents' world. Raya laughed, pulling him close, her eyes meeting Nolan's, a shared warmth passing between them. "Pancakes it is," Nolan said, ruffling Zion's curls, and the three of them moved to the kitchen, a makeshift family finding its rhythm. Batter splattered, Zion giggled, and Raya caught Nolan's gaze, her smile a quiet thank you for this, normalcy, love, a chance to rebuild. But the past wasn't done with them. Days later, the penthouse buzzed with routine. Zion's toys scattered across the floor, Raya's sketchbook open on the counter, Nolan cutting calls short to be home by dinner. The media had quieted Nolan's statement. A child needs love, not lawsuits, shifting the narrative, giving them space to breathe. Raya's move, temporary as it was, felt less like a test and more like a choice, each day knitting them closer. She hadn't told Nolan about Aunt Melinda's prayer, the Easter letter as God's sign, but she felt it in her bones, guiding her to trust this fragile new start. That afternoon, Nolan was at the park with Zion, teaching him to toss a frisbee, when his phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize, a text. "We need to talk. Now I'm outside your place. J. Julian." Nolan's jaw tightened, the name a spark to dry wood. He hadn't seen him since their confrontation, since Julian admitted to leaking the video, driven by jealousy and a twisted loyalty to Raya. Nolan texted Raya, who was at the penthouse. "Julian's there. Stay inside. I'm coming." He scooped Zion up, cutting their park time short. "Gotta check on Mom, buddy," he said, keeping his voice light, though his pulse hammered. Zion nodded, clutching his frisbee, and Nolan drove fast, the city blurring past, Julian's motives a dark cloud. Why now? What more could he want? At the penthouse, Raya stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the street below. Julian was there, pacing outside the lobby, his face taut with something she couldn't read. Anger, desperation, regret. She'd trusted him once, leaned on him when Nolan's ambition swallowed their marriage, but his betrayal, the video, the lies it fueled, had shattered that. Her phone buzzed, Nolan's text confirming he was close, and she exhaled, steadying herself for whatever came next. Nolan arrived, Zion in tow, and sent the boy to his room with a promise of later playtime. He found Raya in the living room, her eyes sharp with worry. "He's downstairs," she said, voice low. "What does he want?" "Nothing good," Nolan said, his hands flexing, the memory of Julian's words. "I cared about her more than you," fueling his anger. "Stay here, I'll handle it." She grabbed his arm, her grip firm. "We handle it together. No more walls, Nolan." He nodded, her resolve grounding him, and they took the elevator down, stepping into the lobby where Julian waited beyond the glass doors. He looked older, haggard, his suit rumpled, eyes burning with something raw. Nolan pushed the door open, Raya at his side, and faced him on the sidewalk, the city's hum a tense backdrop. "You've got some nerve," Nolan said, his voice low, controlled, but edged with fury. "What do you want, Julian?" Julian's gaze flicked between them, lingering on Raya, a flash of pain crossing his face. "I didn't come to fight," he said, hands raised, but his voice shook, betraying him. "I came to set things right." "Set things right?" Raya's voice cut through, sharp and disbelieving. "You filmed us, Julian. You leaked it, turned our lives into a circus. There's no fixing that." Julian flinched, his hands dropping. "I know I screwed up. The video, it wasn't supposed to blow up like that, but you need to know the truth, both of you, about before." Nolan stepped closer, his frame taut, towering over Julian. "You've got 10 seconds to explain before I throw you out myself." Julian's eyes darted to Raya, then back to Nolan, and he spoke fast, the words tumbling out. "Those emails, Nolan, the ones you got years ago when you thought she cheated, they weren't real. I forged them, changed her words, made it look like she was with someone else. I wanted you gone, wanted her free of you." The air stilled, the confession a blade slicing through time. Raya's breath caught, her hand gripping Nolan's arm. "What?" she whispered, her voice breaking. You made him think I betrayed him." Nolan's mind reeled, flashing to those emails, short, cryptic, sent from Raya's account, hinting at another man. They'd come during their worst fights, when silence ruled their home, and he'd believed them, let them fuel his anger, his distance. They'd driven a wedge, pushed her to leave, pushed him to sign the divorce papers without a fight. "You lied," he said, his voice low, dangerous, each word a spark. "You broke us." Julian's face crumpled, but he didn't back down. "I loved her, Nolan. You were killing her, your deals, your ego. I thought if you were out, she'd see me. I thought—" Nolan's fist moved before he could think, connecting with Julian's jaw, a crack that echoed on the empty sidewalk. Julian staggered, blood on his lip, but didn't raise a hand, his eyes locked on Nolan's, almost daring him to hit again. Raya gasped, pulling Nolan back. "Stop," she said, her voice firm despite the tremble. "He's not worth it." Nolan's chest heaved, his knuckles stinging, rage burning through him. "You took years from us," he spat, stepping back, Raya's hand anchoring him. "From me, from her, from Zion. You don't get to walk away clean." Julian straightened, wiping his mouth, his voice hoarse. "I'm not. I'm done, Nolan. I just needed you to know." Raya's eyes blazed, tears streaking her face, but her voice was steel. "You don't get to decide what we needed, Julian. You had no right. Get out of our lives." He nodded, a broken gesture, and turned, disappearing into the city's flow, his shadow swallowed by the crowd. Nolan pulled Raya close, her body shaking against his, the weight of Julian's lie crashing over them. Those emails, fake, forged, had shaped their end, fed Nolan's doubts, Raya's despair. They'd lost years, not just to his ambition, but to a betrayal neither saw coming. Back in the penthouse, Zion was still in his room, humming to his toys, safe from the storm. Nolan called his lawyer, voice calm but final. Press charges against Julian Cross, invasion of privacy, defamation, whatever sticks for the video, and look into email fraud 3 years back. I want it airtight. He hung up, turning to Raya, who stood by the counter, arms wrapped around herself. He broke us, she said, her voice small, eyes distant. I thought it was just us, just failing. But he pushed it. Nolan crossed to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. He didn't break us, he said, his voice steady. He bent us, Raya, but we're here. We're stronger now. She looked up, tears falling, but nodded, leaning into him. I hate him for it, she whispered, but I'm glad it's over. It is, Nolan said, his arms wrapping around her, a vow. He's gone. That chapter's closed. They stood there, holding each other, the city's hum a faint pulse beyond. Zion's laughter broke the silence, calling them to his room, and they went, hand in hand, to their son. Julian's lies, his jealousy, had cost them years, but not everything. They had Zion, each other, a home built on truth now, not shadows. Nolan watched Raya lift Zion, her smile returning, and felt the past settle, not forgotten but finished. Charges would be filed, justice would come, but their focus was here, pancakes, kites, love that had survived. Nolan held Raya in the penthouse, their shared silence a shield against the echo of Julian's confession. The revelation, forged emails, a deliberate lie to fracture their marriage, had shaken them, but it also clarified something. They'd survived worse than betrayal. Zion's laughter from his room, bright and unburdened, pulled them back to the present. Nolan's call to his lawyer had set justice in motion. Charges against Julian for the video, the emails, everything. But it was Raya's hand in his, her tear-streaked face against his chest, that grounded him. We're stronger now, he'd said, and meant it. They'd closed that chapter, not with anger, but with a choice to move forward, for Zion, for each other. Later, as they tucked Zion into bed, his small voice broke the quiet. Is Julian mad at us? He asked, clutching his truck, his eyes wide with a child's intuition. Raya smoothed his curls, her smile steady. No, buddy. He's just far away now. We're okay. Zion looked at Nolan, seeking confirmation. You're staying, right? Nolan knelt, his hand on Zion's. Right here, kid. Always. The promise settled Zion, his eyes closing, and Nolan felt it settle himself too. A vow to never let betrayal touch his son again. The days that followed were quieter, the media's buzz fading as Julian's absence left no fuel for scandal. Raya's temporary move became less temporary, her clothes filling drawers, her laughter filling the penthouse. They didn't talk about forever, not yet. But each night, Zion's stories, their shared glances, felt like a foundation, brick by brick. Nolan scaled back more meetings. Raya started painting again, her canvases brightening the walls. The lie about Lila's name, once a wound, was healing. Raya's honesty had closed that gap, and Nolan's forgiveness was real. But one question lingered, unspoken. What came next? Nolan felt it growing, a need to make this permanent, not just for Zion, but for the love he'd never stopped feeling. Easter, the letter, the sign, had brought them here, and with Zion's 5th birthday approaching, he saw a chance to write the next chapter. Zion's birthday landed on a warm May Saturday, the penthouse transformed into a riot of color. Balloons in red and blue, a banner proclaiming Happy 5th, Zion strung across the living room. Raya had spent days planning, her artist's eye in every detail. A dinosaur-themed cake, a table piled with gifts, a playlist mixing Zion's favorite songs with the jazz she and Nolan loved. Nolan, usually at ease in boardrooms, was a whirlwind of nerves, helping set up while stealing glances at Raya, her sundress catching the light, her laughter bright as she taped streamers. Guests arrived, Raya's sister, her husband, a few of Zion's preschool friends with their parents, Aunt Melinda, her braids adorned with gold beads, her presence a quiet blessing. The kids ran wild, chasing each other with toy dinosaurs, while adults mingled, the air filled with chatter and the clink of glasses. Nolan caught Melinda's eye, her knowing smile steadying him. She'd been there when Raya prayed for a sign, and now she seemed to sense what he planned. Zion, in a tiny T-Rex shirt, was the center of it all, his grin wide as he showed off his new dump truck, a gift from Nolan. Raya knelt beside him, helping stack wrapping paper, her face glowing with a joy Nolan hadn't seen in years. He watched them, his heart full but racing, the small box in his pocket heavier than any deal he'd ever closed. The party hummed along, games, cake, Zion blowing out candles with a dramatic puff that made everyone laugh. Nolan moved through it, playing host, but his mind was on the moment he'd planned. Raya caught him once, her hand brushing his arm. "You're quiet," she said, her eyes searching. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," he said, his smile masking the nerves. "Just taking it in." She nodded, trusting, and returned to Zion, unaware of the weight in his words. As the sun dipped, casting golden light through the windows, Nolan knew it was time. He signaled Melinda, who clapped her hands, gathering everyone. "All right, y'all, let's give Zion one more cheer before presents," she called, her voice warm, guiding the crowd to the center of the room. Zion stood on a chair, waving like a king, and the guests laughed, clapping. Nolan stepped forward, his pulse a drum, and raised a hand for quiet. "Hold on," he said, his voice steady despite the churn inside. "I've got something to say first." The room hushed, eyes turning to him, curious. Raya looked up from beside Zion, her brow furrowing slightly, sensing something big. Nolan crossed to her, taking her hand, and knelt, one knee on the hardwood, the box now in his palm. Gasps rippled. Melinda's soft, "Lord, yes," Zion's puzzled. "What's Nolan doing?" But Nolan saw only Raya, her eyes widening, her breath catching. "Raya," he began, his voice low but clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "This Easter gave me more than a second chance. It gave me faith again, faith in us, in love, in the family we're building. You and Zion, you're my home, my everything. I lost you once, and I'll spend my life making sure I don't again." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, a sapphire, her favorite, set in gold, catching the fading light. Her hand trembled in his, tears glistening, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not perfect," he went on, his voice rough with emotion. "But I'm yours, always. Will you marry me?" The room held its breath, Zion's small gasp breaking the silence. Raya's tears fell, her smile breaking through, radiant, unguarded. She knelt too, meeting him at his level, her hands framing his face. "Yes," she whispered, the word a vow, a release, a beginning. "Yes, Nolan." He slid the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking, and pulled her into a kiss, soft but fierce, sealing the moment. The room erupted. Cheers, applause, Melinda's joyful hallelujah. But they stayed locked together, foreheads touching, the world fading to just them. Zion tugged at their arms, confused but grinning. "Are you married now?" he asked, sparking laughter. "Not yet, buddy," Nolan said, lifting him between them, Raya's arms wrapping around them both. "But we're gonna be." The party surged back to life, guests crowding to congratulate, Melinda pulling Raya into a tearful hug, Zion demanding cake. Nolan stood with Raya, her hand in his, the ring a quiet weight, grounding them. He caught her eye, her smile a mirror of his own, and felt the past settle, Julian's lies, the years apart, the pain, eclipsed by this, their family reunited, whole. Later, as guests left and Zion crashed on the couch, clutching a new dinosaur, Raya leaned against Nolan, the penthouse quiet again. "You surprised me," she murmured, her fingers tracing the ring. I didn't know I was ready." He kissed her temple, his voice low. "Easter changed me too, Raya. That letter, it wasn't just you. It was us, meant to be." She nodded, her eyes bright, and they stood together, the city sparkling beyond. Zion's soft snores a reminder of their center. The lie about Lila, the media's claws, Julian's betrayal, they were scars, not chains. They'd marry soon, not rushed, but certain, building a life where Zion's laughter filled every room, where love was the loudest sound. Do you believe people can truly change? Have you ever seen someone you love become better just for love? Drop your thoughts below. Nolan stood with Raya in the fading glow of Zion's 5th birthday party, her hand warm in his, the sapphire ring catching the last of the sunlight. Her whispered yes still echoed in him, a vow that felt like a new beginning. Zion's laughter, muffled now as he curled up on the couch with a stuffed dinosaur, anchored them to this moment. A family reunited, whole despite the scars of their past. The guests had left, Aunt Melinda's hallelujah, lingering in the air, and the penthouse was quiet, balloons sagging gently in the corners. Raya leaned into him, her smile soft but certain, and Nolan knew this was more than a proposal. It was a promise to never lose her again, to build a life where Zion's joy came first, where love outshone every shadow, Julian's lies, the media's noise, the years apart. They didn't rush the wedding plans that night, but as they cleaned up, Raya stacking plates, Nolan sweeping wrapping paper, they talked, small things like Zion's love for kites, and bigger ones like where they'd live, what forever might look like. "Not here," Raya said, glancing at the penthouse's glass walls. "Somewhere softer." "For him," Nolan nodded, already picturing a house, maybe by the water where Zion could run free. The idea felt right, a step away from the empire that had once consumed him. Over the next months they grew into that promise. Raya's temporary move became permanent, her paintings brightening the penthouse, Zion's toys claiming every corner. Nolan scaled back more, delegating deals, his focus shifting to mornings with Zion, evenings with Raya. The charges against Julian moved forward, privacy invasion, fraud for the forged emails, quietly, without fanfare, a door closed. Raya's truth about the Lila lie faded into forgiveness, their trust rebuilt in small acts, her hand in his voice reading Zion to sleep. By fall, they'd set a date, spring, a year after Easter's letter, when the world felt new again. Nolan proposed a house outside the city, and Raya agreed, her eyes bright with possibility. They found it in December, a sprawling home by the Long Island Sound, white clapboard with a wide porch, grass stretching to the water's edge. "This," Raya said, standing on the lawn, Zion racing toward the shore, "this is home." Nolan pulled her close, the wind tugging her curls, and knew she was right. A year later, May bloomed warm and golden, the waterfront house alive with the hum of their new life. The wedding had been simple, perfect. On the lawn, under a canopy of white flowers, Zion carrying the rings, tripping once but grinning, Raya in a flowing dress, her hazel eyes locked on Nolan's as they vowed forever, again. Aunt Melinda officiated, her voice rich with gospel cadence, and when they kissed, Zion cheered louder than anyone, sparking laughter through the small crowd of family and friends. The memory still warmed Nolan, a touchstone he carried through every day since. They'd settled into the house, leaving Manhattan's pulse behind. Nolan downsized his empire with surgical precision, selling off non-essential ventures, stepping back from boards, keeping only what let him be home by dusk. His office was now a sunlit room overlooking the water, where he worked half-days, Zion sometimes helping with crayons and chatter. The billionaire was still there, in the deals he closed, the wealth that secured their future. But the man Raya loved, the one who'd knelt at Zion's party, was who he chose to be. Raya thrived, her art finding new life in a studio above the garage, canvases bursting with color, inspired by the sea, by Zion, by love reclaimed. But her heart pulled beyond herself. One night, over wine on the porch, she told Nolan her dream. A charity for single mothers, offering support, housing, job training, childcare, so no one had to feel the weight she'd carried alone with Zion. "I want to give them what I didn't have," she said, her voice fierce with purpose. Nolan listened, his hand over hers, and said, "Do it. I'm with you." By spring, Raya's charity, Beauty for Ashes, was born, named for the verse that had carried her through. To give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning. She poured herself into it, meeting with social workers, securing grants, Nolan quietly funding the gaps without overshadowing her vision. The first center opened in Brooklyn, a warm space where women found not just help, but hope. Raya came home from each visit glowing, her purpose a mirror to Nolan's own shift. Less empire, more family, more meaning. Zion, now 6, was their center, his energy filling the house. He'd grown taller, his curls wilder, his questions sharper. "Why's the moon round? Can I have a dog?" And Nolan marveled at him, this boy who'd changed everything. One Saturday, with the sun high and the lawn green, Nolan decided it was time for a new milestone. He'd bought a bike for Zion, blue with training wheels, and set it up by the driveway, Raya watching from the porch with a coffee mug, her smile soft. "Ready to ride, buddy?" Nolan asked, kneeling beside Zion, adjusting the helmet straps. Zion's eyes widened, half excited, half nervous. "What if I fall?" "Then I catch you," Nolan said, his voice steady, a promise deeper than the moment. "Or you get up and try again." They started slow, Nolan holding the seat, jogging alongside as Zion pedaled, wobbly but determined. "I'm doing it," Zion shouted, his laughter ringing across the yard, and Nolan grinned, his chest tight with pride. When the training wheels wobbled too much, Nolan steadied him, never letting go until Zion found his balance, pedaling a few feet alone before tipping into Nolan's arms. "Again," Zion demanded, and they went on, the afternoon stretching golden, Raya's laughter joining in when Zion nearly steered into a flower bed. "You're gonna owe me new roses," she called, but her eyes were bright, watching them, her husband, her son, her home. As dusk settled, Zion exhausted but triumphant, Nolan carried him inside, the bike parked proudly by the garage. Raya followed, her hand brushing Nolan's arm, a quiet thank you in her touch. They tucked Zion in, his bike helmet still on until Raya gently pried it off, kissing his forehead. "Best day ever," he mumbled, already half asleep, and Nolan's throat tightened, the weight of those words heavier than any deal he'd closed. Downstairs, the house was quiet, the water lapping softly outside. Nolan poured 2 glasses of wine, joining Raya on the porch where she stood, gazing at the sound, the stars just beginning to prick the sky. She leaned against him, her warmth familiar, grounding. "He's gonna be a terror on that bike," she said, her voice light but full of love. "Already is," Nolan chuckled, his arm around her. "Takes after you." She elbowed him, laughing but stayed close, her head on his shoulder. The moment felt complete, their life a tapestry of small victories, Zion's growth, Raya's charity, their marriage stronger than ever. But there was something new in Raya's quiet, a softness Nolan hadn't placed yet, a glow that went beyond the day's joy. The next morning they walked to the water's edge, Zion racing ahead to skip stones, his laughter carrying over the waves. Nolan and Raya followed, hand in hand, the breeze cool against their skin. She paused, her eyes on Zion, then turned to Nolan, her smile shy, almost nervous. "I was going to wait," she said, her voice low. "But I'm pregnant." Nolan froze, the words sinking in, a rush of joy so sharp it stole his breath. "Pregnant?" he repeated, his voice breaking, a grin spreading as he pulled her close. "Raya, that's when?" "3 months," she said, her hands on his chest, tears in her eyes. "I wanted to be sure, after everything. But it's real. We're having another." He kissed her, fierce and tender, the world narrowing to her, to Zion, to the life growing inside her. "I love you," he whispered, his forehead against hers, and she laughed, the sound pure, free. They called Zion over, kneeling to tell him. "A baby?" he asked, eyes wide, then grinned. "Can it play trucks?" Nolan laughed, ruffling his curls, promising a sibling who'd learn from the best. That afternoon, they played by the water, Zion chasing waves, Nolan tossing him into the air, Raya watching from a blanket, her hand resting on her stomach. The sun dipped low, painting the sound gold, and she smiled, a quiet peace settling over her. Nolan caught her eye, Zion tugging at his hand, and she mouthed the words she'd held since Easter, since the letter, since this life began anew. "God gave me beauty for ashes." The house stood behind them, windows warm with light, their future stretching wide, Zion's bike rides, Raya's charity growing, a new child to love. The past, Julian's lies, the pain of loss, was a scar, not a chain, and here, by the water, with Nolan and Zion playing, Raya knew they'd built something eternal, a family forged in faith, love, and second chances. What's one thing you've forgiven someone for? Share it in the comments. You never know who you might inspire. Thank you for watching this powerful Easter story. We hope it touched your heart. This story is a reminder that even the strongest fall, but love, grace, and forgiveness can raise us again. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our weekly stories. Let me know what this story meant to you. Where are you watching from? And what was your favorite moment in the story? Let's talk in the comments.